Have you ever felt the urge to explain yourself, even when no one asked? Have you ever softened your truth just to sound less difficult? Held back a no because you didn't want to seem selfish? What if I told you that this habit, this compulsion to explain, is quietly draining your power? Not because others demand it, but because deep down, you've been trained to believe that your worth is tied to how well you make others comfortable. Let's start here. Where did this need come from? Childhood, maybe. You were rewarded for being agreeable, for justifying your behavior, for oversharing to gain acceptance. You learned that to be understood was the same as to be safe. And so now, even as an adult, you explain when you're tired. You explain when you say no. You explain when you go silent. You explain why you're setting boundaries, as if protecting your peace requires permission. But here's what no one tells you. The more you explain yourself, the less they listen. Because when your boundaries need long essays, they start to feel like negotiations, not declarations. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Explaining is often unconscious. A knee-jerk survival reflex, a way to feel seen, even if it makes you small. But what if awareness is the beginning of power? Because once you notice the urge to explain, you also notice your power to choose silence instead. Silence isn't weakness, it's restraint. It's clarity without apology. It says, I don't owe you my energy just because you're uncomfortable. Silence doesn't beg to be understood. It stands. And when you walk away without defending yourself, you say more than words ever could. Because sometimes, every explanation is just another leash, pulling you back into someone else's expectations. But silence is a boundary. It is a decision. It is self-respect, embodied. And it's only when you learn to stay silent that the world finally hears who you really are. Now let's talk about what happens when you stop explaining. People will project. People don't seek to understand. They fill the silence with their own stories. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, cold, arrogant, even selfish. And that's okay. Because what they see is not you. It's their discomfort with not being in control. It's their relationship to uncertainty, to boundaries, to power. Your silence becomes a mirror, and what they project onto it reveals who they are, not who you are. They are reacting not to your truth, but to their own unresolved chaos. So let them misunderstand you. Let them guess. Let them be uncomfortable. You don't owe them an explanation for choosing peace over performance. Because every time you defend your truth, you hand it over for someone else to debate. You are not responsible for the versions of you that live in other people's minds. You are only responsible for your energy, your boundaries, your inner alignment. And sometimes, the most powerful act of self-love is letting people get you wrong. Let's be honest. Explaining yourself isn't harmless. It's exhausting. Every time you justify your choices, you make a small withdrawal from your emotional bank account. And it adds up. Each "let me explain" costs clarity, costs calm. You don't just lose time, you lose presence, you lose your center. Carl Jung called it psychic energy, the internal fuel that keeps your mind, your spirit, your will alive. And here's the truth. Every unnecessary explanation leaks that energy into a black hole of someone else's misunderstanding. You pour it out, hoping to be seen. But often, it just disappears, unheard. And the worst part? You start feeling exposed, but never understood. Tired, drained, scattered, over-explained, and still misread. But when you stop explaining, you don't just go quiet. You go inward. You reclaim what's yours. Energy for healing, focus, growth. You stop feeding what drains you and start nourishing what builds you. Because not everyone deserves a front row seat to your inner world. Protect your energy. It's the most valuable currency you own. Let's talk about the feeling no one wants to admit. Guilt. That tightness in your chest when you don't reply right away. When you choose silence over defending yourself. When you say no without softening it with a smile or a list of reasons why. You feel selfish, unkind, like you're somehow doing life wrong. But here's a radical truth. Guilt isn't always a sign that you've crossed a line. Sometimes, it's just a sign that you're crossing over into a new version of yourself. A version that's less reactive, less available, less afraid of disappointing others. The guilt comes from old conditioning, from the roles you were trained to play. The peacekeeper, the good one, the fixer. That guilt is your past self trying to pull you back into the smallness you finally outgrew. Let it sting, if it must. Let it ache a little. Growth often does. But don't let guilt steer the ship. Don't confuse discomfort with wrongdoing. You're not being unkind. You're being honest. You're being whole. Because every time you choose truth over people-pleasing, your boundaries grow stronger. So do you. Let's clear something up. Detachment isn't coldness. It's clarity. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop bleeding for things that were never your wounds. When you explain yourself less, you begin to see what was always true. Not everything deserves your involvement. Not every disagreement is an invitation. Not every opinion needs your response. Not every tension is your burden to untangle. People will misread you. They will project. They will assume. But here's the trap. If you live to correct their version of you, you'll abandon your own. That need to be understood can quietly become a prison. You'll spend so much time adjusting your truth just to be palatable that you'll forget what your truth even felt like. Detachment is the art of letting people misunderstand you and being at peace with it. Because the moment you stop needing to be seen clearly, you start to see yourself clearly. And that is when you stop disappearing from your own life. Healthy detachment doesn't disconnect you from love. It reconnects you to your center. You're not rejecting others. You're reclaiming your role as the main character in your own story. Jung talked about the persona, the mask we wear to survive in society, to be liked, to be safe. Explaining yourself constantly is a function of that mask. You explain to maintain the image, to not disrupt the role. But the more energy you give to the persona, the more disconnected you become from who you really are. Your power is not in how you're perceived. It's in your alignment, your internal integrity. And sometimes, alignment sounds like, no thank you, I don't feel the need to explain, or simply silent. Here's the part no one wants to hear, but it's where your freedom begins. Let them be wrong about you. Let them mislabel your silence as arrogance. Let them say you've changed. Let them call you cold because if your peace disrupts their comfort, they were never seeing you. They were seeing the version of you that served them, the one who always explained, always softened, always made room. But you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be real with yourself. And sometimes, being real means being misunderstood, even hated by the people who only loved your compliance. Let them say you're distant now. Let them twist your silence into a flaw. Let them grieve the version of you that never truly existed, because every time you break out of a role, you'll lose the audience that needed you to stay small. But here's the gift. In their absence, you'll hear something deeper, your own voice, unfiltered, no longer performing, no longer apologizing for your evolution. Let them be wrong. You don't need to correct their version of the story. You just need to keep writing your own. Because when you stop living to be understood, you start living in truth. And truth doesn't always make you popular, but it will make you free. When you stop explaining, something magical happens. Not just outside, but deep within. You no longer feel the urgency to fill every silence or justify every move. You speak less, but when you do, people listen, because now your words carry weight. You've stopped offering your truth as a peace offering. You hold it like it's sacred, because it is. You don't react out of habit anymore. You respond with awareness, or not at all. You enter rooms with a quiet confidence. People feel it, even if they can't explain why. Especially in your silence, they feel you more than ever before. This is presence, not needing to prove, not needing to persuade. You no longer trade clarity for comfort. You no longer trade truth for belonging. And decisions made in self-respect, you no longer explain them, you stand in them. You become still, focused, grounded. And in that stillness, you become undeniable. Because true presence isn't loud. It's not performative. It's rooted. It's the quiet knowing that your energy is yours to protect. And your power was never in being understood, but in being whole. So I leave you with this. You do not owe your soul to those who only ever wanted your silence to be convenient. You do not owe your truth to anyone who can't sit with it. You do not owe your peace to those who only valued your chaos. And the next time you feel that familiar urge to explain, to soften, to justify, pause. Not because you're afraid, but because you're free. You're not here to be understood by those who were never ready to see you. You're here to remember your wholeness, to embody it, to protect it. And that wholeness begins the moment you realize you were never born to explain your freedom. You were born to live it unapologetically and fully.